Northern Colorado is not getting its fair share of transportation dollars from either the state or the federal government. I've been working on this issue for 15 years. I've been on every corridor study and state study, including the I-25 corridor study, the 402 corridor study, the Highway 34 corridor study, 287 corridor study, the study between Fort Collins and Loveland, the transit study. For 15 years we've been looking at, through the MPL, North Front Range Transportation Authority, we're not getting our fair share of transportation dollars. And it's a matter of safety. There's a problem on I-25. There's a problem. If you've ever used the Loveland 34 I-20 overpass and you've come in there, it's very, very dangerous. Every time you fill a gallon of gas here in northern Colorado, you send off 22 cents to the state. You know how much you get back to northern Colorado? 1 penny. We've got 10% of the population, we've got 17% of the road miles traveled here in northern Colorado. All we want is our 2 cents worth, 1 more penny in transportation. The next issue, the part of that question, was the state's role in land use planning. The state should stay out of local land use planning. That is a local issue. That is a municipality issue. That's a county issue. And we don't want the state to be meddling in our land uses here in northern Colorado.
Okay, Sue.
Well, Jody brought up a salient point, and that is that the places where we build our houses and our office buildings and our shopping centers are in completely different places. I mean, none of that is integrated, and so, or at least very little of it is integrated. And until we actually start putting those office jobs in the area where there are homes, and putting the shopping in the area where there are homes, and putting homes closer to the office jobs, this kind of thing. Until we start to do that, it will be impossible for people to actually hold a job and go to the grocery store without driving. And that's something we need to really look at, because with our current model, our transportation vehicle miles traveled, I mean, it's mathematically well known that that number increases much faster than population. And so, you know, eventually, if we did nothing, transportation could conceivably eat the entire state budget. And so we do have to change our ways. Now, what's the state's role in land use planning to try to make this happen? You know, on the one hand, you don't want to actually force anything, but on the other hand, the state is in a position to do that if it's something that would have to happen. You know, and getting people to say, okay, we're building enough housing for 1,000 employees. Why don't we put enough employment for 1,000 employees in the same place? And then you have a community. You don't just have a dormitory. So this is something I think we should look at pretty hard in terms of land use and trying to create pedestrian lifestyles that people will be comfortable and happy with.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll try to live within the tyranny of 2 minutes here. Let me take it backwards as far as dealing with land use first. I do believe that the state should be, for the most part, not trying to drive land use from a centralized system. Believe me, down in Denver, there is not the wisdom that we have on what's best for Larimer County as there is in Larimer County. I do believe the state has a couple of roles. One is to be that referee when jurisdictions are coming up against one another and, you know, sorting out what are the fair and equitable rules and ways of you know, fixing those issues. So there is a role for the state, as well as, and this is a very high priority for me, maintaining the private property rights of individual citizens. That's why I ran a bill last year to address the issue of just compensation for private property rights, because that's important. Now, concerning transportation, I believe that is a very, if not the most important role of state government, to ensure that we have that proper infrastructure to allow the state to continue to flourish in the 21st century. And yet we have a funding issue problem that Don spoke of. That's, again, why I ran a bill this last year to try to address that, to find new revenue sources so that we can, in fact, have the dollars to put in the right systems. The worst system is gridlock. No one is served well by that. And yet we also need to be cognizant of the way zoning laws have compartmentalized so much of our culture. I agree, we need to have a more homogenized system, which I believe begins from the ground up rather than from the top down.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to skip to Jennifer here, and then I've got a specific county question for Mr. Horak after that.
Okay. I think that we need to think about some new ideas about helping reduce the brown cloud at the same time trying to get to where we want to go. I'm a sign language interpreter by trade, and so I'm driving everywhere. I drive to Wyoming, to Southwest Nebraska, to Denver, and that's what I have to do for my job. I try and drive an environmentally friendly vehicle, but I think that we can do more along the lines of raising our emission standards, and I think we can also focus on, for transportation funding, we can also work for the state and try and promote intergovernmental agreements as well, because I know one of the issues in Larimer County is that there's two really big cities and a few medium-sized towns and then some little areas where we all need to get along to be able to promote transportation efficiency in Larimer County and also throughout the state. Also, I'd like to look at trying to promote intergovernmental agreements with bus service between Estes Park and Loveland in particular, but also in between Wellington, Fort Collins, and Loveland. Last week I got the opportunity to speak at Poudre High School, and there were a lot of people, a lot of kiddos from Wellington and Red Feather Lakes that really want some recreation opportunities that, because they don't have a car and they don't have a driver's license, they can't get to the big city where they can use those recreation opportunities. And so I think it would be really interesting to try and have some intergovernmental agreements between the state and the different municipalities to try and find solutions so we can solve our transportation issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, question about the county has a ballot issue this fall regarding a tax increase to support the Justice Center and corrections programs. Your feelings about that?
Well, I'll tell you my position, also my feelings. I'm not in favor of the tax which is going on the ballot. There's a number of reasons for that. It was not put together until a little over 2 months. It was just put together 3 weeks ago, the end of August. Finally put together. This tax is a $2 billion, yes, I used the word, $2 billion tax that goes on in perpetuity, basically forever. It's a tax that really says our best answer to what we can figure out now with criminals is we have a trend line going up. We can't change the trend line, and we got to build enough jails, cages to put people in. And that's our approach. That's how we're going to deal with the problem. I don't think that's the way to deal with it all. The tax does not deal with prevention whatsoever. It has a little bit of money in it for dealing with treatment, but not really a treatment center. Needs to have, if you want to deal with the problems that we have going in the jails now, 80% of the problem deals with meth. And if you don't get treatment for those folks, they're going to come out again. They're going to keep committing the same sorts of crimes. You have the other thing, when you take a look at criminal justice, the relation of education. I'm not talking about getting a PhD. I'm talking about getting a GED. People get GEDs that have a lot less crime than folks who do, or less times that they come back again into the system. So anyway, I think the tax is not well put together. We have a huge problem to deal with, but this is not the answer.
Okay, thank you. We have time to run one more question past everybody, so I'm going to kind of condense. We've had a lot of questions, as you might expect, with the groups here tonight about recycling and the state's role in recycling and support for legislation, and also is that a wise place to put money, the state's money, those kind of questions. So I'm just going to roll that into one, and Don, I think you're next to start here.
When I was on City Council in Loveland, our solid waste program was one of the best in the country. Mike, no, sorry, you can probably when somebody's in my... Our solid waste program is one of the best in the country. If you look today, for example, it was the day to do, I call it design your trash, where you separate your trash and design it, make it pretty, and put it out in front. And, you know, on our block, I tell you, almost everyone, because I was thinking about tonight, and I was thinking, and before I really hadn't looked out there. We take ours out every week and, you know, go through and put our aluminum cans and our wine bottles in one thing and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's interesting that that program has worked so well, and we've received numerous rewards for that. Our trash collection, I don't know what you're doing, we recycle in Loveland almost 90% of our trash. We put very little trash into the Larimer County, I call it the graveyard. But, you know, very little trash goes there because Loveland uses so much of that trash from the landfill. And so we're ahead of that game, and I think that it is very important. I have 2 grandchildren, Liberty and Wyatt, 5 and 2. And this earth, we need to take care of it. We need to be stewards of this earth, and that's part of recycling is doing that. I recycle old cars, 1932, 33, 34 Fords. And I take those out of the junkyard and recycle those cars and bring them back to better than they looked in 1932, 33, and 34. And everybody can do their part in society, and I think we are. So it's a very important issue. It's a state issue. We need to spend money on recycling, and when I'm at the state legislature, I will be involved with recycling.
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks. Don is absolutely right. Here in Larimer County, we're doing a great job with recycling. On my block, everybody's got a recycle bin out there, and not just a trash can. So I think it's widespread and it's happening. I'd like to see more recycling of construction materials and reuse of construction materials. We have a resource site that just opened on North College Avenue, and a friend of mine helped get it going. And it's another, it's not a franchise, but it's an offshoot of the Boulder resource site, and that's a great thing because they're actually, at this point, they're kind of cherry-picking from demolition projects and pulling out high-value-add items like cabinets and some wood floors and that kind of thing. But really, we could be much more aggressive about recycling construction materials, and we could be salvaging the 2x4s and the lumber and various other materials from these places. And so I think that's something that we could be more aggressive with. And, you know, it costs something to take these places apart. Maybe we could provide, the state could provide perhaps some incentives for doing a deconstruction instead of a demolition on a building that's coming down so that the material can be reused. So that's something that I think the state could probably help with.